蔻蔻 VIP。
欢迎大家，继续来到蔻蔻早餐节目。我们今天这个节目呢是录音播出的哈，最重要的原因是因为我们今天的来宾非常特别，他是AIT 的前任的台北的处长，同时呢，也非常谢谢这位前任的台北处长这个司徒文大使呢，他特别从新竹来到我们的节目啊。司徒文大使呢，他的国语其实讲得很好，但是他很客气，他说这个访问呢要用英文进行，但是我们还是可以一开始就跟司徒文大使呢做这个Mandarin， 也就是我们的中文的国语的打招呼哈。司徒文大使你早。
早安好。
你好。
我谢谢你请我来参加这个访问。可是你的尊重，他们应该原谅我。因为我觉得不舒服，如果我就说中文，因为我知道我说错很多，所以我觉得有可能最好你可以翻译我的英文。可是得看简单的事情，有的时候有可能我可以加点中文。
你的这个中文已经讲得非常好了。司徒文大使是你在 AIT 做台北的办事处的处长嘛 ，Director，
对，
其实就是一个 Underground Ambassador，right？
我不会说美国政府叫我一个Chief of Mission， 所以我们不说大使，当然台湾人一般来说叫我大使，可是美国 Chief of Mission。我有一样的地位，差不多跟大使一样。比如说，在华盛顿准备到台湾来，我也参加。我们有一个大使的课，两个3个星期，所以我参加跟真的大使。
所以 Chief of Mission 翻成中文叫做
Chief of Mission 就是。
你们在国务院里面，
因为有的时候你提到大使，你说大使是我们的 Chief of Mission， 所以差不多。
所以呢，司徒文大使今天呢，就是公开告诉我们了，这个秘密就是其实 Chief of Mission 跟 Ambassador 是一样的啦。
Well， 可是美国政府说，因为1979年的时候，我们没有外交关系，所以我不能说大使。他们不应该叫我大使，可是事实上都把台湾的政府的代表人都叫我大使。
所以你的待遇、你的 treatment 也都是大使阶级啊。
对呀。
好。
可是台湾人是非常客气，为了这个原因，他们叫我大使。还有，如果他尊敬我，叫我你是大使。还有提高台湾的地位，也是一样，所以是互相的利益。
司徒文大使好可爱哦！司徒文这个名字是你自己取的吗？这个 Chinese name？
是我台湾的老师。
台湾老师？什么时候？
因为我学习中文在台湾唯一的时间是在台湾1986年到87年12个月，所以在阳明山，美国在台协会有一个学校。对啊。
这是你第一次来学？
有一点在华盛顿准备到台湾来，可是事实上我在华盛顿什么都没有学习。
所以第一次来学国语，
真的学习。
学习的时候，老师给你取名字叫司徒文，because 因为你的 last name 是
Stanton。他们说是司徒是 S 那个声音，司徒 Stanton。还有他们觉得是。我应该骄傲关于这个名字，是因为司徒他们说明古典的时候，这个复兴，他们给侨联的官员照顾教育的问题，
对，就是
我不知道
教育的这个高官啦，这是复姓啊。
对啊。
然后文是 William 嘛，就是
William 是因为我有英国文学的博士，他们说文是也高级的名字，是因为文学、文明、文化，所以还有文跟 William 是差不多。
所以你很喜欢这个名字咯？
开始时候我不喜欢，是因为我的同学他们都批评我，他们说司徒这个是不好的中国的名字，是因为他们是陈、郝、李。
对，那是
他们说复姓那么奇怪，没有什么，所以那个时候有点不舒服。可是以后那么多人说，这个是那么好的名字，不是就是一个英文的名字翻译中国差不多的。
对
，you know，
所以是
吉星者。
对，吉星吉
是不一样。
所以但是司徒文先生其实在台湾很有名，这个名字已经取代了大家都忘记他的英文的那个这个 first name 跟 last name 了。
现在如果我告诉
你是 Mr. Staten， 人家 Staten，
没有人认识我，我说司徒文，我认识你。
所以你自己也知道你在台湾很有名。现在的司徒文大使，他现在是清华大学的首席副校长。
现在
已经退了。
我差不多，我当副校长差不多16个月。我想他们的希望那个时候我也可以交到资源，帮助我们的大学，我没有真的成功，不容易。
资源意思就是 resources， 就是募款吗？
对。不容易，
你好逗。
所以我没有成功，可是
你说你的募款的 quota， 募款的这个配额没有达成。
他们没有说这样子，可是这个是事实，所以我比较坦白的说，不要告诉他们。
所以你们两个就互相默契了，你就不做这个vice president。
可是事实上有很多的新疆的自然，我没有那么大的兴趣，参加很多的
行政，他刚刚讲的就是行政的事情。
行政的事情。
行政，
对呀。
administrative 的这个东西。
对呀。
所以你就辞掉了。
no， 我们都同意是很好。本来的我不要这个地位，是因为本来的那个大学请我来，我应该当大使当教授。他们请我来建立以前的台湾校长，台湾清华大学的校长。请我来建立一个小的智库研究所。
小智库研究所。
对啊。
Asia Policy。
对，那个亚洲政策中心。
对。
所以我们那个时候，我们的目标就是给我们的大学，还有给台湾。如果我们参加论坛、会议，我们可以给台湾更大的声音。
对。
关于。亚洲的问题，政策，还有两岸关系，还有关于台湾的内政的政策、社会的问题，所以这是我们的本来的目标。
亚洲政策中心本来的目标。
可是所有的台湾的大学有很大的预算的问题。
有很大的预算的问题。
预算的问题。对，如果不寻求，是因为思想不好。是因为学生的经费太低。
所以你现在在Asia Policy 的这个所建立的这个 center， 你已经工作了有很长的一段时间啦。你去那边已经有。
我本来的我继续，我当同时，我当副校长，我也那个时候继续当那个主任，对呀，所以我有2个工作。那个时候，现在我就是主任。
只做亚洲中心主任。那个，Are you satisfied with the directorship？
非常满意。可是因为我们有预算的问题，比如说 budget problems.
Yeah.
Because we have budget problems, we had to let one of our postdoctoral fellows go. So now there's only me, one postdoctoral fellow, and a secretary. So 很少。
人很少，因为预算的关系，所以你必须去扩大你的这个预算的来源嘛，对不对？所以你的意思就是说，你现在在清华大学。副校长已经不做了，然后刚才他很开玩笑说，那个就是因为资源的关系啊，每一个大学都是这样啊。那所以现在你是亚洲政策中心的主任，但是因为预算的问题，所以你们这个编制就人比较少，所以你好像有点小忧虑的样子，是不是？
你的中文非常好。
我中文不好的话，那我就去，就自己打屁股。
你翻译现在大家
你的英文
听得懂我说什么？否则的话，他们都听不懂。他说什么？
听得懂啊，邱如玉萍，我们都听得懂，对不对？这个，因为司徒文大使他今天特别从清华大学来，非常谢谢他这个。
我还是住在台北。
你还是住台北？
对，所以每个星期我在清华差不多2-3天。
2-3天。
可是我也应该很多的工作，还有我应该维持我的接触，政治、经济、商业的，还有。你知道一部分我的目标就是访问文章，因为这个也是一个方法，我们可以告诉大家，你 pay attention to 清华 University.
Oh, sure.
Because we're a great university.
Of course, sure. 清华大学是一个好学校。刚才这个司徒文大使说，他现在还是住在台北，但是他希望除了清华的亚洲政策中心主任这个工作之外呢，他也希望跟各界来接触访谈，然后写作然后希望让大家能够注意到这个清华大学，当然也注意到台湾呢。你是非常少见的这个美国驻台湾的大使然后留在台湾嘛你到目前为止，你这个决定还是正确的吗？
那是真的一个决定，是因为那个时候。
你后悔了吗？后不后悔？
我不知道，是因为现在
不知道你后不后悔
？No， 我将来的情况我不知道。我有一个女儿，她就在澳洲，她跟一个澳洲人结婚了，是不是？她当记者。现在是因为 Trump。是美国的将来的总统，他大概至少10年没去美国。
你说你女儿不要回美国？
对。
So you are happy, when you are staying in Taiwan and American elected President Trump, you don't have to stay in the United States to suffer.
对。那我很高兴，现在我不跟美国政府工作。
好，他说。
所以我可以表示我自己个人的看法。
好，等一下我们就要问这个问题了。这个刚才这个我问，Are you regret for your decision to stay in Taiwan?
No.
Oh no.
但这个我听不懂你的意思。
后悔是。
No， 我非常爱台湾。
Oh sure, thank you very much. We have to put our commercial on to make some money. Okay. 谢谢司徒文大使，我们要进广告了。好，我们今天呢非常谢谢司徒文大使，也就是前 AIT 驻台北办事处的处长。事实上呢，这个就是驻台湾的大使那刚才司徒文大使提醒我们，他的原来的 last name 是 Stanton， 但很多人都忘记了。司徒文大使非常的知名，因为你很喜欢台湾，所以我们大家都也非常喜欢你。
不知道，有的人有可能不喜欢我。
不会，很多人都喜欢你那这个刚才说我问你，你会不会后悔有没有 regret 的留在台湾？你说 no， 没有，完全
没有，完全没有。
而且他还很高兴说，他现在是不在政府工作，
对呀，
是因为川普当选了。
对呀。
OK，现在我可以用 Chinese 的问你问题，然后你可以 if you feel 这个 comfortable in English you can speak in English about Trump because
这个是比较复杂的。
对，这是一个比较这个严肃的题目哈。Right after the election, I saw watched the TV program about your remarks. You are not so happy for Trump's victory. And after 已经 2 weeks, right? Have you changed your opinion?
No.
我刚刚问的问题就是说，司徒文大使有没有改变他对川普的看法？因为刚刚开始，川普当选之后，他就说这是 disaster, right?
Yeah, 灾难。I still think.
Why?
Well, because I think. Well, there's so many reasons.
Okay.
One thing is, in the run-up to the election, he lied about so many issues.
Lied.
For
example.
Well, for example, he would make facts up all the time. He said, for example, that we sell no cars to Japan, and they flood our country with cars, America with cars. But in fact, you know, the U.S. last year, I think it was $6.5 billion worth of exports to Japan.
6.5 billion?
Yeah. So it's not like we don't export anything.
Yeah.
Second of all, there were many other facts that he lied about. For example, well, he kept on saying the election was rigged until he won it. Then he said, oh, it was a very fair, it was a good election. He was opposed to the electoral vote because he thought that Hillary was going to win them. But then once he won with the electoral votes, he said, well, you know, the electoral college is fine, that way of electing.
Yeah.
And then third of all, he then said, you know, even if it were the popular vote, I would have won that. Although right now the evidence is Hillary Clinton leads the popular vote now by over 2 million votes.
Yeah, okay.
And it may rise to 3 million.
I have to translate into Mandarin because your statements are very, very
detailed,
specific.
具体的。
非常具体，真的。司徒文大使说，他认为川普当选仍然是美国的，他认为是一个灾难。第一个理由是，川普说了非常多不是事实的事情在很多问题上面是谎言。那我就问他说，举例，他很快就举例了，而且我告诉你，司徒文大使手上没有任何的资料，都在他脑子里面然后他立刻说的第一个理由就是，川普说美国人没有卖这个汽车给日本，只有日本人去卖汽车给这个美国人。事实上，去年呢 ，last year right，这个美国人就卖了$6.5 billion，这是60亿耶，6 billion 呢是65亿这个美元这个的这个车子到日本去那。然后呢，他还说，川普说这个选举是可能有舞弊那这个选前选后他说他赢了，他还说这个选举是很好的，是公平的。然后接下来呢，他说他川普在选前反对这个选举人票制度，然后他赢了之后，他又说这个很好。那接下来呢，他又说我会赢这个普选票那结果呢，普选票现在这个希拉蕊已经被证明已经领先了200万票，这是他的 lines，OK？ 好。
But you know there are so many. There's one online you can find a list of 101 lies that Trump told between June of last year and March of this year. So it doesn't even include the lies, the false statements, the incorrect facts that he offered the public between March and when he was elected. So he's made up so many things. So that's only the first problem, though.
Okay. So you think he is a liar, and the liar cannot be a good president?
Well, you know, I don't know. That's a different question. But
if he changed to some true personality and changed his strategy to face the country, Would you give him
Well,
opportunity?
Well, sure, and there's some indications of that happening, but
Yes.
it's not only lying, but he illustrated an incredible lack of knowledge and understanding about the actual situation. For example, his promise, let's make America great again. Mm-hmm. But in fact, over the last 8 years, unemployment went down to its lowest level ever, practically, to 5%. The U.S. economy improved every year over those 8 years. So he said crime was up and crime was down. He created false impressions about America and the condition that America was in. And that was the biggest lie of all. He kept on saying everything in America is terrible.
Okay.
And that's not true.
好，第二个他说。人家列出来101个谎言哦，这个关于这个川普啊，他是从去年的6月到今年的3月而已，那还不包括3月到11月，他做了非常多的这个不正确的评论。那我请教司徒文大使是说，那如果他幡然悔悟改变了呢？就是说，如果川普他这个改变过去所说的这些对司徒文大使来讲的谎言的话，那要不要给川普总统一个机会呢？司徒文大使也注意到了 ，right 然后他说他确实现在有一点点改变，但是他还是认为他的这个 lack of knowledge 这个他的知识不足You think?
这是因为我们知道他不看书，他不看书，是因为他一本书他理论上写的，可是他的 ghostwriter.
He has been writing a lot of books.
No, they're all ghostwritten.
他说这个司徒文大使说这个川普不看书，然后我问他说，川普不是出了非常多书吗？
In the very first book, which sold the most copies,
Yes.
How to Make a Deal, I think. That book, the author of that book has done a long article saying the whole time he spent 6 months with Trump because he couldn't get Trump to pay attention long enough for interviews, that he convinced Trump that he could sit in his office and just observe him all day. He said he never saw in Trump's office or anywhere in his home, wherever he went, one book. There were no books. And the only magazines and newspapers he saw were those that had his picture on them, on the front page. He had lots of those.
President Obama is a book reader?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. 看书很重要吗? Is it important for a person to be a good president?
Either that, it helps a lot if you understand the world in detail. I mean, for example, Trump has never once mentioned in his campaign Taiwan. Does he know Taiwan exists? Or does he think it's Thailand?
Okay, that's a good question 这个刚才司徒文大使说这个我们讲他说这个川普不看书，然后川普的他书都是 ghostwriter 就是他的捉刀人所写的。那帮他捉刀写第一本书的人，后来也写了很长的文章，说川普这个人在家里面没有任何书office 也没有书那他认为他说奥巴马总统有看书那一个不看书的人这个他会有足够的知识了解这个世界吗？然后他甚至对台湾知不知道然后他还说川普制造了一些假象，说美国现在是就是在衰退，事实上不是如此，失业率其实是降低的，然后这个经济是发展的，对不对然后这个所以他的 ask to build up a great America， 你认为这只是一个 slogan
对啊
，Okay. We will take a break and 这个进一段广告，马上回来。Ambassador 司徒文呢，刚才对川普这位美国总统的当选人呢，未来的美国总统仍然不抱希望，他是认为是灾难。他举出了非常多的例子，特别是他对台湾理解吗？他说到底台湾是台湾还是 Thailand， 他是不是清楚 ？But according to the news report, the Republican Party had issued a 6 commitment to Taiwan.
That was pre-election. That was the 6 assurances, so-called 6 assurances, which were originally delivered through, I think it was Ambassador Lilly at the time.
没有李杰明时代
，and they came from President Reagan. Okay. This was a follow-up to the 82 agreement with China, the 82 communique, and Congress was not happy about that agreement, which talked about gradually reducing arms sales to Taiwan, consistent with the overall security situation. So the 6 assurances are important, but those 6 assurances were an initiative of the Republicans in Congress, and the Democrats supported it.
Yes.
So the whole legislature, and both the House and the Senate, voted to reemphasize the 6 assurances as a part of U.S. policy. And, I also have criticized, in a paper I've just written that hasn't been published yet, or may not be, who knows, but the fact that the U.S. sometimes casually refers to its one China policy implies, for many people, China likes it because it implies that we believe there's only one China, 一个中国. But if you notice, all countries which have recognized China's sovereignty over China don't define China and don't make any statement of sovereignty over Taiwan. They always say, we acknowledge, we recognize the Chinese position that Taiwan is part of China. So if you say one China policy, it's misleading. Whereas there's also, in the 6 assurances, there's a clear statement that we don't recognize China's sovereignty over Taiwan. So one of the things I'd like to see any administration that takes power do is to refer more to some of the statements that the Chinese wouldn't like so much now. For example, the Chinese in the 72 communique talked about how big powers shouldn't bully little powers. They talked about how the trend of the world is, for people to find their own sovereignty.
So you mean, in short, the 6 assurance or from Republican Party is not a commitment from President Trump.
No. It was the legislature.
From the Congress, the legislative institution. Yes. So you don't think that President-elect Trump knows Taiwan well? How can our government or our people do something to revise it, to change it, or to improve it, to make some methods or some endeavor to give more information to Mr. Trump to know more about Taiwan?
Well, it's a difficult task, but the first thing you have to hope.
Can we translate? 前面讲到这个六项保证啊，这个刚才其实那一段这个我们司徒文大使解释很清楚。他说，共和党的6项保证不是川普的6项保证 ，right？ In short 就这个意思。那6项保证其实是美国的立法机构，也就是美国的国会这个2党的这个共同的承诺对台湾，而且对，而且是很早。在雷根时代、李杰明时代开始就一贯的一个基础啦，就是6项保证。但是这6项承诺保证不是川普的态度啊。那第二就是说要知道，在美国的这个一项所认知的就是台湾China 它这所谓一个中国政策，它基本上来讲就是一个台湾是中国的一部分。right 如此而已嘛哈。那我的问题是说，那我们要怎么样让不是很了解的台湾的川普总统多了解台湾？
Well, the basic answer to that first is that we've got to hope that some of the people around him will have a knowledge of Taiwan and have a more realistic attitude toward China. Now, in general, the trend lines are good because a lot of the people who are being named.
Yes, good 哈，我要翻译一下哈，就是说刚才这个，我们怎么样让 Mr. Trump President-elect Trump 能够多了解台湾？刚才这个我们的司徒文大使说，就要让他身边的人多了解台湾，然后呢，对这个 China 有一些比较务实的看法啊。那现在的发展还不错 ，right？
对 Also, the overall trend in America, according to the Pew survey of last year, it was published in September of 2015. They sample favorability ratings of countries, and the unfavorable views of China in the United States had reached, it was either 53 or 54%. And that negative trend in attitudes to China began around 2012. So increasingly people are more skeptical of the way our policy towards China has been handled. So, and in general, there have been a lot of foreign policy articles written about increasingly people are aware that a lot of our hopes for the China relationship with the United States have been disappointed. For example, since China entered the WTO, the World Trade Organization, the U.S. deficit since that time has amounted, trade deficit, to $3.5 trillion. Okay, so it's been a disadvantageous trade relationship.
Yes.
There's also been incredible amounts of IPR, intellectual property lost, okay? So, and then third of all, one of the original arguments, and I was working in the State Department during the Clinton administration, when they were arguing about whether China should be in the WTO, whether it deserved most favored trading status.
Yeah.
Now, all the big corporations wanted to get in because they're the groups that make the most money in China.
Yes.
Because they're concerned about bigger markets.
Yeah, American companies.
Right, American companies. But nobody says, well, I just want to make more money. So the argument was, as China opened up its economy, as it did more trade, it would liberalize, human rights would improve, and the overall relationship would get better, and that never happened.
So, well, you mean we can use the trend to influence President-elect Trump's China policy?
Possibly, but it also means that some of the advisors, I think, are going to reflect that trend. But also, I think Taiwan needs to do more in terms of lobbying Washington.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. But how do we do? But 刚才前面这个司徒文大使已经说了，他说在美国有一个趋势，那就是2012年到2015年开始，在这个喜欢的国家跟不喜欢的国家里面，这个对中国的态度其实一直在上升当中。去年呢是53%到54%对 China 跟这个美国的关系是感觉到这个怀疑的，那而且是失望的，而且双方的这个从中国大陆进入 WTO 之后呢，双方的这个赤字已经到3.5 trillion， 就是3.5兆这个的这个美元了。那在这个情况之下，台湾应该多一点对美国的游说这个是刚才司徒文大使的建议。等一下我们还要再进一段 commercials 进一段广告，马上回来要请教这个那司徒文大使给我们蔡英文总统什么建议？那蔡英文总统跟司徒文大使应该算是you are friends, right? With President 蔡英文。
我不知道我们可以说朋友，可是我跟他，我们以前我当处长以后，我们有一个好的关系，可是我也有，我觉得那个时候一个好的关系跟马总统。
你跟马总统跟蔡英文总统都很好。
可是
我们进广告了，对不起。
有的时候我是外交官。
我们今天呢非常荣幸请到了司徒文大使来到我们的节目这个今天录音的时间是24号礼拜四。事实上呢 在这个时间的明天呢，今天晚上就是美国的 Thanksgiving 哈，所以非常谢谢这个 special 哈这个 day 哈，司徒文大使来到我们台湾，这个来到我们的电台的节目啦。司徒文大使已经是我们的台湾人的家人的一部分了，对不对？最后8分钟 ，the last 这个8 minutes we would like to ask you for some opinions or some suggestions for President Tsai Ing-wen how to deal with President Trump right after next year.
Well, an awful lot, as I've kind of indicated, I think will depend on what kind of policy he adopts towards China, towards Taiwan, toward our allies in Asia, in particular Korea and Japan. And one of the things that troubled me about his foreign policy in general before the election was that he seemed to reach out more to our enemies than to our friends. He expressed grave doubts about NATO, about our alliance with Japan, with Korea. He spoke about maybe Korea and Japan would be better off with nuclear weapons. He spoke out against the TPP, which is both economically and geostrategically important for the United States.
Okay, I will translate it. 刚才这个司徒文大使大概说了，就是说，这个川普我刚刚请教他对我们蔡英文总统在川普总统就任之后应该会有什么样的建议。他说，事实上就要看他的这个外交政策啊。那现在看起来。川普总统好像对他的敌人比较好一点，对这个他的这个盟邦国家似乎他的外交政策不是那么的这个友善，表他对北大西洋公约组织的态度，对 TPP 的态度，以及对美国跟日本的态度。Actually 这个President elect Trump has already said on Monday 22nd that he will announce the drop of TPP right after his inauguration, right?
Right.
How about how do you suggest Taiwan to do?
Well, I've frequently recommended to Taiwanese government officials when I have a chance to meet them with academics and to students that Trump has never said he doesn't like or he's opposed to free trade agreements with individual countries. So I've always recommended, there was always the risk with the TPP that China would put pressure on other TPP members to keep Taiwan out. So it's always been my view that the most important thing is Taiwan should set about meeting the requirements of the TPP. When it's met those international high standards, it then should go to Washington and say, okay, we've complied with everything, let's have a bilateral free trade agreement. Frankly, the most important two members of the TPP for Taiwan are the United States and Japan. And Japan, it should also turn around and say, we've met the standards, let's have a free trade agreement. Now, actually, under Tsai's administration, there's already been progress toward doing that. AmCham, back in September, welcomed a decision of the Executive UN because one of the complaints of U.S. foreign investors in Taiwan had been when Taiwan issues a new government regulation that affects trade or business, it was only a 2-week period before it was implemented. And they had been asking for many years already that be extended to at least 2 months so that foreign investors had time to examine the implications of those regulations and their bearing on their companies and to suggest changes if necessary in those regulations. And Taiwan finally agreed to do that. That's one, that kind of what we call regulatory transparency is very important in free trade, and Taiwan has now achieved that.
所以刚才这个司徒文大使对于我问的问题就是说我们现在 TPP 这个看起来川普总统是要在他说他就任之后立刻就要这个取消这个 TPP， 那我们怎么办呢？当然就是做自由贸易协定就是 FTA， 认为台湾 最好就是我们达到了 TPP 的标准之后，我们就可以去跟华盛顿说我们已经达到了标准了。然后斯文大使还说，我们现在在很多的这个自由贸易的一些协定上面，其实都很透明化了。But if we talk with American about FTA, will American pork be the first problem of the first issue? How do you recommend?
已经一个问题。Well, it's one of the
我刚刚
problems.
问的是美猪的问题。
Let me make a couple of points. The U.S. is the least dependent on exports of any major country in the world. Only 13.5% approximately of our gross domestic product depends on exports of goods and services.
Yes.
For Taiwan, it's 70.1% of your GDP. So you are a trading nation. Without trade, 不存在。
不知道啊。
So
But you have said the issue of American pork is a political issue, right?
it's more complicated than that. It's a protectionist issue. Because after all, you finally did agree, once the World Animal Health Organization said a certain amount of ractopamine, 10 parts per billion, is safe in both pork and beef. You let beef in, but not pork. Why? Because you don't raise much cattle. But you raise a lot of pigs.
Yes, of course,
But
sure.
let's remember, 70.1, 70.5 of your economy depends on exports. Do you know what share of your GDP depends on agriculture? 1.9%. So agriculture is actually totally unimportant to your overall economy. It's important to pig farmers and to people who grow stuff. But if you're going to comply with the international standards of what is safe or not safe, then ultimately you have to give in on that issue.
So you mean at last we have to allow American pork to import to Taiwan?
Yeah, but you can
we have no choice.
Well, no choice if you want a free trade agreement. I mean, if you want to go on being dependent on China, I mean, currently 40% of those exports go to China and Hong Kong, and the ones that go to Hong Kong go to China. So if you want to lessen your trade dependency and have free trade with other countries, which means, look, in a free trade agreement, the smaller market always benefits.
Yeah.
You're 23 million people selling to 330 million people. So you benefit from a free trade agreement. So it's to
You're very persuasive. You use some numbers to tell our audiences about why we should allow American pork to come in. But I have to translate it into Chinese.
But I always add, you have to let it in. You don't have to buy it or eat it.
他说刚才要做美猪一定是一个问题。他说这个美国人的出口只占他的 GDP 的13.5个百分比，但是我们的 GDP 占71%，所以我们是这个出口大国，我们是出口国家啦。我们的农业只占1.9%啊。那所以他说这个我们是。台湾是一个出口国家，而且双边签署 FTA 的话，对小的人口的国家是比较有利的，因为我们只有2300万人，那美国有3亿人嘛那这样的话，我们可以出口给比较多的国家。那sounds reasonable。然后他说
有逻辑。
他说我刚才说他讲的也有道理，他说有逻辑呀。然后他又说他说你可以进口，但是不要吃这个。Well， 今天我们的节目这个so happy and very very enlightened from your remarks, right？
你非常
有启发性然后今天司徒文大使他这个很客气，他有一些比较重要的陈述，他讲英文，事实上他的国语讲得非常非常的好而且我告诉大家的秘密，他人很帅
不会。
You look younger than much younger than your real age.
35
Yeah, maybe 25 希望你将来可以再来我们的节目，也希望你可以 enjoy this interview, right?
Yeah.
你
说好玩？It's fun.
好，很好玩。
可是我就有可能明天或是后天，
不会，
我交替我说什么？
你没有说错话，因为 so you will never change your views about President-elect Trump.
当然，如果他真的改善他的政策，
你会？
没有，我会。可是，一直到现在为止，我看到有的他的证明，我非常紧张。有的方面更好，可是，比如说他的政策关于那个 abortion 的问题，政策，关于 abortion，他不会改变。他的看法关于所有的违法的移民都应该让掉。
It's criminals, not the older illegals, he said.
Well, no, he ultimately wants all illegals out. But that's one of the problems. What does he really mean?
Okay.
He was going to build a wall. Now he says, well, part of it would be a fence. He said, I don't believe in climate change. It's a hoax from the Chinese. Now he says, well, it may be something to it.
So
he was for torture, and now he talked to one general, and he says maybe it's not a good idea.
The core problem is how to believe what President-elect Trump has said, right? Okay. 好，这个很忧虑的司徒文大师我们这个半个月以后，或是半年以后，还可以请司徒文大师来这个evaluate President Trump 但是不管怎样，非常谢谢 You are a friend, a family of Taiwan, and 希望你一切顺利
谢谢。
非常谢谢司徒文大师。他刚才讲到最后那一段是说，他没有不给川普任何的机会，要看他有改变。可是到目前为止，也就是说，我们访问司徒文大师的时候，他很多的政策还在变来变去当中那就 wait and see, right?
Right.
Thank you.
谢谢。
See you again.
非常感谢你。